This review told us to throw the book away and unlearn everything in it. After 25 years of managing Crohn's disease naturally using this diet, I knew I had to say something. I'll be breaking down some of the biggest criticisms I've seen from what might be valid and what just needs a little bit of explaining. So stick with me. We're going to go over some pretty interesting comments that I have seen about breaking the vicious cycle over the years. Too restrictive. So I have heard this one many times in the 25 years I've been doing this. It's something that doctors will say, something that nutritionists might say, although they're usually a little more open-minded, hopefully. But a lot of times I see it from people, just like in this review, that it's too restrictive. Now, I'm not going to judge. For some people, it might be too difficult to follow, and it might not be appealing to them to try. I'm not here to force anybody to try this diet. But I'm here to say that restrictive is relative. There's a lot of foods we can eat on a CD diet. It's just a matter of figuring those out. And I think that is where the hard part comes in for a lot of people, because the foods might seem a little foreign. Depends on what you were eating before you checked this book out. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, this is going to seem kind of overwhelming. I was there when I started. That's exactly where I was at when I started it. So I get it. But there are so many things you can eat on this diet. You're going to be honing it, hopefully, for your body and for you to help manage your disease. And that's where you're going to see, if you start to see results, it's going to make that all worth it. But when you start, I get it. Seems kind of weird. But the diet isn't really as restrictive as it seems. A lot of people like to throw that word around because it's a lot different than a standard Western diet. And so it feels restrictive because you're not so much eliminating certain foods, but you're adding so many more in. And I think that's the important part to remember when it comes to breaking the vicious cycle. They say it doesn't work in the real world. I can see that depends on your circumstance. If you're not used to cooking, you don't have the means, it is going to be harder. But it is perfectly doable. Everybody's world is the real world. So, and lots of us are doing it. So it's highly individualized, but that argument is going to depend on your own personal situation. But I want to say, start simple. It's not as restrictive as it seems. Okay, so this one makes me a little sad, actually. Elaine Gottschall, okay, she wasn't a PhD. She was a biochemist. She was a researcher. She spent her life researching this stuff after her daughter went through this process. Like, she had no experience in it before, and then from that point on, she spent her life dedicated to researching the digestive system, specifically when it came to disorders like IBD. Her book is filled with references that are pages and pages long. So it wasn't something she took lightly or just made up out of the top of her head. It was something that she spent a lot of time doing research about the molecular reactions in our digestive systems. Now, have we learned more about the microbiome since then? Of course. That's what we want. That doesn't invalidate the science of this book. Most of it is still valid. And I'll be getting into a couple of other things in a minute here about, where we've learned something new, but the foundation of this diet still holds true. That's why it's being researched in all kinds of different places, including University of Massachusetts and, in other studies, particularly in pediatrics, a lot through Seattle Children's Hospital. That's where that research is coming from. And these are doctors and scientists who are looking into it. So it is not pseudoscience. It is not made up. There is so much research that goes into this that it's sad to me that somebody would just throw that comment out there for others to see and be like, oh, it's not even real. It's just a fad, or it's just one person's opinion. It wasn't just her opinion. I mean, she talked to so many other experts and spent so much time researching it, like I said, and going over study after study. That's why, there's like several pages of citations in this book for her research. So it is real science, and that is just what it is. It's real science. All right, artificial sweeteners. I know that gives a lot of people pause when they read Breaking the Vicious Cycle that a diet soda is allowed, aspartame sweetened diet sodas once a week and a saccharin sweetened 3 times a week. And then it advises adding a little saccharin tablet to wine to sweeten it up if you want, because I don't know, I don't drink any alcohol, so I don't really know if the wine allowed is not as sweet. I don't know why that advice is there. I don't know that you can actually buy saccharin tablets anymore anyway, but I don't really recommend the artificial sweeteners. When the book was written, there wasn't a lot of research on sweeteners and the microbiome, which there has been now. I actually just put a little article on my Substack about that you can check out. I'll put a link in the description about that. But I think a lot of us who follow SCD probably avoid artificial sweeteners, but this is for the people who are checking it out and they're seeing that obviously it's giving them pause or making them angry. And I get that. I totally get that, but that doesn't make the rest of the book junk. It doesn't invalidate the research in the rest of the book. Things change over time. As I said earlier, the foundation is still there, and that we just sometimes we have to make some modifications. I have some other things that I'll be talking about in the future about where I might think that the science has changed a bit since the book was written, but doesn't make the foundational elements of the nutritional therapy of specific carbohydrate diet invalid that she mentions allowing the artificial sweeteners. Personally, if I'm talking about gut health, I'm saying to cut out alcohol as well. So there's no sweetening wine anyway. And I think that the point though is that don't let that section invalidate the entire book. Just because that's in there and we wouldn't think that way about artificial sweeteners now and the microbiome doesn't mean that everything else in the book is wrong or invalid or outdated. So I think that's important. There are a lot of negative reviews of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. There are not a lot of negative reviews, but the ones that are out there, a lot of them mention it being outdated. And I agree, there are some things in the book that are outdated. But the principles, the core foundation of the diet is not outdated. And as I mentioned before, that is why it is being studied by people in the medical community and the GI world, the GI researchers. They are looking at the diet and they are looking at that foundation and the research that has been done and was done by Elaine and taking that and seeing how they can apply it to what we currently know about the microbiome. So don't let that bother you. Don't let that deter you. It's unfortunate, that happened. People were like looking at that and being like, this book is junk because of this one thing. Don't let that, the foundation is still solid. Foundation, the core principles, still totally valid within this diet. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say about that. This is a completely valid point. So a lot of people do try the diet, 100%, or as this person said, 1,000%, and they don't see results or they don't see good results. Unfortunately, that is the case with some people, and don't let that make you think that you're doing it wrong. Even the little bit of studies that have been done on SCD will not show 100% efficacy. There's nothing that is 100%, including medication. So I think it's important to have compassion about that point and not assume, well, you just didn't do it right or you didn't really do it 100%. The truth about diet and IBD is that that's not going to work for everybody. The other thing that's important to know is that maybe there is a dietary approach that would work for you or that person. They just need to figure out what it is. That can be very difficult. SCD is one of the first to combat IBD, but it's not the only one. I've known people to do other things, including like a macrobiotic diet. I've known somebody who is a proponent of a plant-based diet, and everybody is like, this works because it worked for them. So, but that might not be the case. And for some people, they do need medication. And I do know of somebody who said they needed the medication and they needed a diet, and that their medication didn't work without them doing the dietary component as well. So I think these are important things to consider when we're thinking about SCD. That person, even though they gave it a 1-star review, I don't think they were actually saying the diet doesn't work, but they were saying it didn't work for them. So they, of course, they're disappointed because you want to feel better. So that's a review I have a lot of compassion for, because I've encountered it so many times where the diet just did not work for them, and or maybe it even made their symptoms worse. So it's just going to be different for everybody, and that is a completely valid point, is that we need to have compassion when people say that something didn't work for them, because that's probably the case. I mean, it's probably not, oh, you're just doing it wrong. So compassion first. Time consuming and expensive. I get that. I get why that is the first impression. And I'm not here to invalidate anybody's experience. That definitely could be a huge factor depending on your lifestyle. But I do invite people to think about this a little bit, because let's start with expensive. So I have known people to do this diet in college, in dorm rooms. It also goes with the time factor. On a very limited budget. When I first started the diet, I was in my early 20s. I was living on my own. I was working an entry-level job. I didn't have tons of money to spend on specialty foods, so I didn't buy specialty foods. I think people look at this and they're like, well, I need to buy all this specialty stuff, but you don't really need to, especially when you're starting out. You know, when you're buying proteins and whatever you choose, whatever you can afford, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, eggs, cheese. So those are like the big staples. Legumes, dry legumes are not expensive if you're able to tolerate those. The other thing is there's going to be a lot of things that you are not buying anymore. So for me, it just balanced out. I'm not going to restaurants at least as much. But yeah, so I didn't spend as much money on some of those processed foods that I was getting. So that really balanced out, and I just watched my budget and I bought what I could afford. And over time, I was able to get more stuff, like some more specialty stuff like that I can get now. But when I started, I did not need that stuff. You need to keep it simple when you start. So the expense factor, I would really take a look at it and really try to balance that out and see if that's really the main factor for you, if it just seems like it until you've budgeted it, and just, you know, take a big look at your overall food budget and see how that's going to work, and see what you're going to eliminate, what you're not going to buy anymore, and what you might just need to buy more of, or maybe it's something new, but it might not be as expensive as it appears when you're first looking through the book. Okay, so the time factor. So yes, there is a time factor. Like I said, I've known people to do this while they're in college and they're in a dorm room or in student housing, and they're trying to work on their papers and go to class and all that stuff. So everybody's busy. Most people are busy. And so yes, time is a factor, but it's always going to be a factor. I think that, you know, some people they're like out of the house a lot, or they travel a lot. So that's going to be a big factor. But let's just assume we're kind of doing our normal 9 to 5 thing, and maybe you've got kids or you're trying to do all that stuff. I have a pretty good idea that we're still making dinner and we're still trying to do all our things. And so yes, you're probably going to spend, especially in the beginning stages until you get used to it, you might spend a little bit more time in the kitchen, and there's also all the cleanup and all that stuff I certainly know about. But I think also that factor can be, sometimes we feel like something's going to take up a lot of time because we don't actually want to be doing that. So that could be like, I don't want to be in the kitchen cooking, I'd rather be doing something else. So that's going to take too much time. So I think we need to look at that factor as well. Is it a factor of it's really not going to work? This is not working for my life. Or is it more kind of a factor is like, I don't really want to do that. And so you got to weigh out, what do you want to do? Because what also takes up a lot of time is not feeling well, because you're not going to be productive. And like, you know, and I am, if you watch any of my other videos, you know I am not a proponent of like, this is a cure. I don't say those kinds of things. I'm just saying this is a tool that helps a lot of people. And if you want to give it a try, you just need to weigh out these factors. And for some people who left reviews like that, I saw that one a lot, maybe it's just not going to work for them. But it's not a blanket statement. We figure out what works for us, and we make time for the things we want to do. It's stuff like this that really made me want to create Kitchen Alchemy. Also, just to inject some fun into it, some history, some learning, some cooking, and just because it becomes a part of our life. And I just think it's really fascinating to know how it all works in the big picture. That it's, you know, that our choices are validated by the way that we choose to approach our situation. And for me, it's not it's kind of a way of making it like this is not a weird, even it's like, oh, I have a special diet. It doesn't have to be. It just is like these are the foods I eat. And so that's why I'm making this show. I hope this preview episode was kind of fun. I'm going to be delving a lot more into other things, but I thought it'd be fun to address some of those 1-star reviews I've seen. If you liked it, please give this a like. Please be sure to subscribe because the next episode is actually coming next week, where I'll be diving into the history of the specific carbohydrate diet and breaking the vicious cycle. It's going to be very interesting. There's I discovered a few things I didn't even know. So I will see you then. And if you have any topics you'd like me to cover that you'd find interesting, just drop me a note, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear. And maybe one of your suggestions will appear in a future episode.